Pops in a pod. Pops in a pod.
Hey everyone, Peter Pop here.
Hi, and I'm Nadir Pop.
Nadir, it's been a while since we recorded an episode Parents in Films, more specifically Bollywood films.
I'm so excited about this episode. We've been talking about this film for almost a year now, and there's so many points that I want to discuss after watching this 3 hour long epic film.
Yeah, and to be honest, right, 3 hours on a scale of a Bollywood film is not too bad. But let's cut straight to the chase. So, the film that we're going to be talking about is Dil Dhadakne Do. Nadir, why don't you tell our listeners who've never watched this film what's it about?
To start off with, I think I have my doubts that people haven't watched this film. I'm sure a lot of our listeners, at least our listeners, would have watched this film for sure. But for the uninitiated, the film is a story about this ultra rich family called the Mehras, right? A dysfunctional family. And the husband and wife are celebrating their 30th wedding anniversary. And for that, they throw this massive party where they invite their close friends and family on a cruise trip to Greece and Turkey. That's the overall premise, but the interesting thing about the film is the relationships and the dynamics of the parents, the kids, the friends, the cousins, a long lost friend, and it just all comes together really well. And the entire film is about just one big relationship. Wonderful.
I mean, the way I would describe it is that it's an anti-Karan Johar film where it's all about loving your parents. Yeah, we've talked about that before, and all of that. But to me, honestly, it's a depiction of complicated parenting, marriage, relationships. Like there's no relationship, if you think about it, in the movie that is very straightforward, right? It's all like at the end of the day just all those fuzzy lines, everyone connecting with each other. So you literally have to figure out who's with whom, has been with whom, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and Zoya Akhtar, who's the writer director of the film, um, I think her films are more about, or at least this one is more about, it's all about understanding your very dysfunctional parents who have no idea what the hell the real world is all about.
Yeah, it's kind of very different in there. It's not those the Yari type of films that she's made in the past. But let's get into the characters. So like Nadir said, there are quite a few parents in this film, but for this episode we're only going to focus on the Mehras, who's Kamal Mehra and Neelam Mehra, portrayed by Anil Kapoor and Shefali Shah respectively. And they have two children, a boy and a girl. Well, I'm using that term very judiciously, but it's played by Ranveer Singh and Priyanka Chopra. So quite a star cast if you think about it.
Yeah, and if we have to sort of delve further into understanding who are these characters, right? So the film is primarily driven by Anil Kapoor and Shefali Shah. People would assume that it would be Ranveer Singh and Priyanka, but honestly, when you look at it, it's being driven by Anil Kapoor, who actually plays a stereotypical successful uh, industrialist from Delhi, right? So he's brash, he's arrogant, he's loud, and and my god, I love his acting. It's
Yeah.
I don't think he got any acting notes. Somebody must have said, just play this character, and he just played it right.
Yeah.
So wonderful. And then you have Shefali Shah, who plays, of course, the, well, I don't know, trophy wife, maybe once upon a time, considering that it's 30 years of the anniversary. But yeah, she's a stay-at-home mom, wife, homemaker, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, that's who she is. Peter, what do you think of Ranveer Singh and Priyanka Chopra, the kids of the Mehras?
Yeah, I think like for them, you see a difference in the kids also, right? Like you have two opposite ends. You've got the successful daughter, you've got the son who's still trying figuring out. And I think in Indian films we always have the male character who's figuring it out his life, right? In the 20s and stuff like that. There's so many movies that come to mind. But yeah, that's all for, like, at least for those who don't know the film, we kind of just given you a broad introduction. Let's dive into the meat of this episode, right? So why don't you kick this one off, Nadir? What's like one of the main takeaways you've seen from this movie?
So before I jump into the first major takeaway, what I want to start off with is that this is not your typical, uh, you know, kabhi khushi kabhi gum bagban kind of a film, right? It's not. It's pretty modern outlook of parenthood, in a way, because you will see the kids sort of take over and make a lot of interesting decisions. But to start off with, the Mehras, which is Anil Kapoor and Shefali Shah, they're stuck in a very, very bad marriage, right? And this clearly has an effect on the kids' future and the decisions that they, just so unabashedly make for them. I mean, they're arrogant, they're controlling, they're overbearing, extremely, extremely hypocritical. And I think it all boils down to the wealth that they have, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think like there's multiple aspects where you kind of see Anil Kapoor literally talking about the rags to riches stories, but a lot of it I feel is just like a very superficial level. And one of the main things that struck me about the movie was, right, like, on the podcast we keep talking about how parents' lives have an impact on their kids, and what kids directly glean unknowingly, right? They obviously figure it out in much later. You can see how the parents' relationship over the period of time, like while they're celebrating 30 years, are they really celebrating 30 years? You think about, right? Like, what is the celebration about? It's overall, you see, it's just a show. That's why we're doing this, you know huge over the top cruise and all of that. But when you kind of dive into it, you realize that the husband, Anil Kapoor, has been having multiple affairs over the years. And the wife, she's actually been turning her face away from it and not kind of focusing on that, and just stuck around in the marriage. Which, if you think about it, then shifts down onto their relationship of their kids, when there's no way to like not bring up the divorce aspect, with Priyanka Chopra and her husband in the movie Rahul Bose. That's what the mother expects her daughter to do. Like, when she wants to get divorced, she's like, no, you cannot do that, right? And because that's not right and not seen in there. And when you think about it, like, for Priyanka Chopra's character in the movie, her example is her mother, who's, despite the father having affairs, is still stuck around. So that's what's expected of her, and that's what actually both the parents expect of her. Which, it's really crazy when you think about it, like how just all of this impacts you, right?
No, absolutely. That's why I started off by saying that this film is a very big relationship. Like, if you look at it as an organism, there's so many multiple relationships with the internal organs, and that's how I look at it. And it's very fascinating to look at different aspects of it. So, like, for me, the first takeaway is the relationships. Like, the deeper you go into the storyline, you realize that it's so interesting to see these characters and the kind of relationships that they share, right? And for me, because we are talking about relationship, the one massive theme that really stands out, which you already brought up, is divorce. And I'm not going to get into the aspect as to how it's tackled in the film and how it should have been. I'm not getting into that. The fact that the film talks about divorce from start to end is a refreshing thought, for a film back in 2015. That means that just shows that we are now modernizing and we are open to talk about divorces, and it's perfectly all right that, yeah, mainstream media to a certain extent is accepting that, and I really appreciate that. And the kind of dynamics that you see between Priyanka Chopra's character and her husband, played by Rahul Bose, and she's stuck in a really bad marriage, which is a clear reflection of her own parents, which is Anil Kapoor and Shefali Shah. They've been stuck in a bad match, and as you rightly pointed out, that this whole celebration of anniversary is so superficial, right? You know exactly what's happening. It's all crumbling from the inside, and I love that. I think it's so wonderfully portrayed that what the parents are, and somewhere down the line, the kids also getting affected.
Yeah, which actually brings me to the next point, right? Which is the disparity in genders. And you can see a clear difference in just gender roles in there, right? I mean, again, this starts off with the way, Anil Kapoor's character is so brash, arrogant, and his wife is supposed to be, this quiet, demure lady, right? There's that sheer contrast. But when you see that in the next generation, right, that doesn't kind of filter down. You see Priyanka Chopra as a successful business person in there, go getter, and all of that. And you see the son kind of, figuring things out in there. But what that does impact, right, is just the way the parents see many other things. Is when Anil Kapoor is looking, his character is looking for a successor to the company, he doesn't look at his daughter, who's already a successful business person, taking over. His thing is, beta, I have to give it to my son, right? And he ensures and, does all sorts of things just to ensure that his son is involved in the business, when his son actually wants to be a pilot, nowhere close to the business, right? And that whole thing is so well played in the movie, right? Because again, think about it, even in 2015, uh, people were aware of just the quality of roles and things like that. But the fact of the matter is, it supersedes. Like, at some point, you just forget it when it comes to such things, right? Especially like inheriting or taking over business.
Oh yeah, and it's interesting to see how it plays out, right? Um, no son character in a typical Bollywood film would be a self-proclaimed doofus, right? Who would go out and say, "Yeah, I'm an idiot. I don't want to be the CEO of this company. I don't know how business works. I don't know how to go about doing this. But hey, listen, we have my elder sister, my older sister, who is fantastic at business. She's just like her dad, and she should be the one taking. Like, you'll never hear that narrative in a typical Bollywood, and that's a refreshing aspect, right? That, I think, is, I wouldn't say a true reflection of the society, but in certain circles that is changing and that is happening, and I really like that. At some point, that just shows that you are hanging around in the right circles. um, and you notice, like, both the parents are doting on that male heir, right? That he's, ye mera naam aage badhayega, right? Typical, right? That who's going to carry the Mehra's name and whatnot. There are multiple instances where in one, I think the humor's hilarious, especially coming from Anil Kapoor. So when Ranveer is saying that, listen, I'm not really good at this, I don't know why you're giving, and Anil Kapoor just very like deadpan, yeah, I know that, but we'll do something about it. We'll make you smart, some stuff. I just burst out laughing every time that scene plays. I'm like, haha, that's so funny. That's such a typical dad thing to do. And then in the beginning of the film, also, meet this one uncle. He says, "Oh, I'm so proud of your daughter. She's made the Forbes list of top 10 entrepreneurs to look out for." Blah blah blah. And instead of Anil Kapoor gloating or being proud, he says, "Next year, my son will be in that list." And you can see, Ranveer's actually like, what, not even one word of appreciation for your own child, irrespective of whether she's a daughter or a son. And yeah, that's really messed up, right? That's so sad. That, of course, it's happening, we also know that it's happening around us, it's happening everywhere. But the fact that people are calling it out in films, I like that. And that's the whole disparity, which is so clearly called out. And you can see that this film has been directed by a woman, and you see that is the woman's touch, right? That's the woman's touch, and it's so nicely done. Of course, I have an issue with Priyanka Chopra's character in general. I have a huge problem with that character. But hey, let's keep that aside. For a person who's such a successful business person, and 100 people, 200 people, member team, and blah blah, and she's so meek and like a little mouse, and I refuse to believe that. But anyway, that's a different matter altogether. We're not getting into that.
Which brings me to our next point, and I think this we kind of see, and we alluded to a bit. But the fact of parents controlling their children's life to sometimes even after they get married, right? I think that was just so crazy when you see, and it just peels like an onion, right? There's so many layers to it when you realize how the parents have been manipulative. I mean, I'm going to call it that, right? Because that's exactly what it is. I mean, when you just see, like, at one point, with Anil Kapoor's character, you're like, oh, he's a person who's not faithful. But then you realize that he's also been playing around with his kids. And there are multiple instances, right? I mean, there's one where he sends the Farhan Akhtar's character away to study when he knows that Priyanka Chopra is in love with him. There's one point where he actually says at a toast that, you know what, I wish uh, my daughter has a child. And can you imagine the embarrassment of like that being said like in a public thing? It's one thing to be said in private, right? But then saying that in there. Another one is just that, he's trying to get his son to marry someone from a business family, and at one point you realize he's doing that only so that he can keep his company alive. So like at any given cost there's like a very ulterior motive, right? He's not doing it selflessly, or everything he's doing is very calculative. And I think that is something that when you look at and you take a reflect back, you realize that's not just an Indian thing, but like that's a very wrong and very toxic parent approach, right?
No, absolutely. And I'm going to start my piece by saying this very common saying, right? More money, more problems. And I think this film encapsulates that, right? It starts with the business dipping, and then you have this huge party. And I like when you said that parents are so manipulative, right? They have converted this wonderful, vacation, peace of mind journey into a business deal, right? On a whim. They've done it on a whim. Why? Because what is the ulterior motive? Money, right? So
Yeah.
he's decided, okay, I'm going to sell this stake and I'm going to call this guy who previously never existed, and suddenly this Lalit Sood shows up because he has an only daughter and he's got deep pockets, and the gears in both Anil Kapoor and Shefali Shah's mind keep turning, and they're like, so yeah, I mean, the whole controlling aspect, it stems from money. And the way Anil Kapoor also holds his son hostage to everything that he wants, and the most important thing in his life is that plane, right? That don't sell the plane, don't sell the plane. I like the plane, I want the plane, I want to whatever, right? And Anil Kapoor uses that as leverage to insult him outright.
Yeah.
There's this one point in the film where he actually gets away by saying stuff like, "You haven't done one days of honest work. How will you survive without me? Remember, I'm your father, and 2 days you go and try and do a job, you'll come running back to me because you don't have the brains, like, or you're not as hard, like something like today. Imagine a father has to tell that to a son in that kind of a. I'm not sure if, or maybe yeah, maybe the guy's son like, oh yeah, my dad's right. He's sitting on millions of dollars. I need that money, but it is so like it just kills you as a human being from the inside, and that is extremely toxic. Money can do so much more. But I think my most favorite aspect about this whole controlling part of parenting is log kya kahenge. It is
Yeah.
too good. Throughout the film, this theme of लोग क्या कहेंगे, सोसाइटी क्या कहेगी, अनिल सूद whatever मिस्टर सूद क्या कहेंगे, ये क्या कहेगा, वो क्या,
And I think,
and I'm like,
yeah, and I think that's the thing, right? Like a lot of times, while I feel that was also very highly exaggerated, but at the end of the day, it's a lot about, the parents are focusing more on not like what their kids want, what will make them happy, what will make us happy. In there, it's all the superficial, right? I mean, just to go back to what I said, the whole thing aspect is just to show that on the surface everything is fine, we are happy, we are happily married, our children are happy. But from the outside it looks like that, but the moment you kind of like look a bit deeper, you can kind of see all the cracks in there, right? And I think that's what it kind of shown in there.
and
And
you know what, Peter, I think that what you just said right now, what's on the surface and the number of cracks that are within, this has been so well articulated by one dialogue in the film where Shefali Shah and Anil Kapoor are having a moment, in on the first night, and Shefali Shah and Anil Kapoor just, maybe he's genuinely happy about how things have been panning out, and Shefali Shah just turns around and says, "Why are you acting? Nobody's watching you." And it just
Yeah.
hits you, right? It's like, oh my god, that's exactly what's happening. Like he's actually performing for an audience, but there's no audience, and his wife gets it because they've been together for 30 years. She totally gets what he's trying to do, and Anil Kapoor just like, oh my god, did I did I
Yeah.
just go from Bruce Wayne to Batman suddenly without realizing?
Yeah, to kind of wrap up what we're talking about, right? I think one of the things I really appreciate about the movie is that it actually shows a family with all its scars and warts or whatever, right? The blemishes, whatever you want to call it, right? And that is very rarely done, especially when you're portraying families in Bollywood films. There are some of the exceptions. I mean, we were talking before recording out just of how divorce is not talked a lot about, right? Or like I can't imagine if divorce is not talked about, when we'll ever portray single parents in mainstream media, right? But the fact, just going back to just parents, right? When you think about it in movies, specifically in mainstream media, you always are shown that the parents are always right, the parents always know best. And this movie actually makes you kind of question and go back, where you actually see the kids talking to the parents and saying, hey, this is not the best thing, this is not what I wanted, right? And I think you need to kind of appreciate the movie for that it's being open about that, right? Families are not exactly as they look on the surface, right? There are problems, and I think it kind of normalizes that also, right? Because everyone expects that everyone is the same, everyone is kind of happy. But some relationships are not simple, right? Like, relationships are not as easy as they are complicated, and they're hard work, I think.
Very important takeaway what you just said, that relationships are hard work. And that's why I have two major takeaways from this film, right? The first one is communication, right? um, Unless and until we are not willing to open up and talk about our problems and just talk about happy and good things and share happy and good things, that doesn't make um, for a good two-way communication, because you only want to talk when you think you're happy. And that's exactly what Anil Kapoor does, right? That when he thinks he's happy and he's achieved something, that is what he wants to share. But all the things, all the discretions in his life that he's had, I mean, he just assumes that people know, but everyone wants to, like, it's this big elephant in the room. Nobody knows. So I think communication extremely important, irrespective of what relationship you share, husband, wife, mom, dad, siblings, whatever it is. I think communication is very important. And the second takeaway that I definitely want to highlight, which is taking a leaf out of what you also mentioned, which is no relationship is perfect, right? You have to work towards it. You have to build on trust and honesty, and that's how it works, right? And because tomorrow, imagine if you're in trouble for things that you probably haven't shared with anyone in your family, and you're caught, and you're found out. What are you going to do then, right? People are just going to lose trust in you that they've built over the years. Which brings me back to communication, and it's just this never ending circle. You communicate, relationship problems are there, they'll disappear.
Yeah.
Communicate, and yeah, it's this wonderful circle. And these are the two takeaways for me.
Yeah, so a very true point, and I think that's a great way to kind of conclude this episode, just on the fact of just communication, right? I think it's one of the most underrated things, and no one really talks about that, right? I think it's taken for granted to a certain extent, also, right? It's assumed that because you're in a relationship, you're communicating. But that's all from us from this episode. Yeah, I hope you've enjoyed this. Coming back to the start where I said, I hope it doesn't take us this long to do another parenting in Bollywood films. But if you have any ideas or any recent movies or maybe a web series, it's been a while we've done a web series, get in touch with us, popsinapod@gmail.com.
Or you can just search for Pops in a Pod on Instagram or Facebook, and we'll be right there. We share some interesting content, and we also put out information of when a new episode's going to be out. So, yeah, follow us and keep those ideas and thoughts coming. We are more than happy to collaborate with you or any guests that you're looking. But I hope you enjoyed this episode, and until the next episode, this is Nadir Pop.
And Peter Pop. See you guys. Cheers.